So we'll go straight to questions. I'd like to ask one question because my speakers have been pressured by me, I'm afraid, to be brief, so they probably left a bit of stuff out. But they both made the assertion that we could easily have 100% reliability with renewables. Now, the government is making a lot of noise about the fact that coal is reliable and, what happened in South Australia. So can you just, either or both of you, say why and how you can be certain that renewables are 100% reliable and we don't need any fossil fuels? Can you all give us a guarantee of that? And if so, why? And then we'll go to everyone else's questions.
The technical answer is you get a lot of politicians saying what happens when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine. Well, the wind is always blowing somewhere, and if your assets are scattered over a big enough geographical area, and now ours are, interestingly, the government committed to a 20% reduction, or 20% generation by renewables, which was 330 megawatt hours per annum. We've actually exceeded that. Despite all the brakes they've put on, we're now generating 440,000 megawatt hours, 440,000 megawatt hours per annum with renewables. And they're scattered over a wide range. They go from far north in New South Wales right down to South Australia, right through to Tassie. The wind will be blowing somewhere all the time. We're particularly fortunate because our southern wind turbines are just at the end of the roaring 40s, and the roaring 40s don't stop. The old sailors used to say that below latitude 40 there are no rules, and below latitude 50 there is no God. And they were right. We have excellent solar resources. Now, sure, the sun goes to bed. Oddly enough, we all go to bed when the sun goes to bed, so the demand really falls. You get a lot of rabbiting on about base load. Base load is a pure artefact of steam power generation. You also hear that there's no rotational inertia. That's the huge masses of the steam turbine and its alternator weighing 400 odd tonnes doing 3,000 RPM. When the load builds up, the steam valves can't open fast enough, but this slows a little bit, and the system frequency actually drops. The batteries, such as the South Australian battery, can stabilise that load electronically much faster than any steam governor. So we can install pumped storage for longer periods all over the place. Every abandoned mine pit, open mine pit, is a pumped storage site. Sure, the heads mightn't be high, but we can get low head machines and we can shift a lot of water. You can build a big turkey nest dam above it, hydro power station to the drop at the bottom, much cheaper than Snowy 2, which is a politician's thought bubble trying to be an engineering solution. So we've got the technology, and getting 100% reliable, renewable power is not a problem. Now, if you don't believe me, there are a number of organisations, and they're not tree-hugging greenies. There's Beyond Zero Emissions, which is an organisation that I'm a card-carrying member of. It's run by hard-headed engineers and economists. They're probably the most aggressive blueprint for getting Australia decarbonised on the stationary power. There's a CSIRO report and there's the Finkel report. And there are many others. You can Google them and they will give you much more detail than what I can right now.
Thanks, Alex.
Can I just want to interrupt for a second. If you want to ask a question, just come and line up down here at the back of the queue. Thanks.
I'll be quicker. The answer is yes, you can technically. The question is where are we at the moment on the cost curve? It's still relatively expensive. If you tried today to become 100% renewables, you wouldn't do it anyway because you actually have existing assets in the system. But what you can be very comfortable is if you started to replace those assets, it'll take you 20 years to replace all the coal-fired power stations anyway. During that period, the technology will improve and it is available and the costs will fall. So it's a completely achievable task. And it's not as if people go renewables overnight. We just need to get on with it as a nation and realise that that's where we're going to be in 20 years' time.
Wonderful talk. Thank you very much. My name's Ken Cregan. As an electrical engineer, I'd like to ask the following. In the next 10 to 15 years, all the fuel going into motor cars is going to have to come from electric vehicles from power stations, which has not been covered. which is an enormous increase. And I can't see renewables coping with this, but I can see atomic power coping with all the problems. So as an electrical engineer, I see the solutions being particularly small modular reactors, which are now relatively safe. And for Australia, we could make them here, not purchase them from the United States. We could make them here, conventional ones. We could put them on barges offshore. We could use high voltage DC transmission to bring the power in from 200 kilometres out, making them even safer. And with that technology, we could sell it around the world. And I can see, so technically we can do it, but I'm particularly interested if you think it's a good solution, as I do, and secondly, how one could make something like that happen.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I'd say it's an appalling solution because you end up with waste which you don't need. So if you electrify the car fleet here, it's a 9% increase in energy consumption. The wreck that we've just built was 26%. That's already been done. You can increase the amount of power here by 9% in a heartbeat if you wanted to, and you can do that all with renewables. So there's absolutely no need to even contemplate another way to create long-term pollution at a much higher cost than what you already can, and you don't need to be fearful that electrons can't be provided. There's no shortage of ability to put solar panels or wind farms out in Australia. We've got trillions and trillions of megawatts just going to waste. Remember, sun is a waste product. You need to stick a solar panel in to pick it up, otherwise it slams into the ground. It's just waste.
Just the technical answer to that. For conventional power stations, I'd like anybody here who's an expert, to quote me a nuclear power station that was finished on time and on budget, and quote me an existing nuclear power station manufacturer like Westinghouse or Kraftwerke that is not insolvent, right? They're all insolvent. Every power station has been built over cost and over budget, and that increases the latest. Yes, they are. The one built in France is right now 2 years delayed because of some minor faults. I can talk to that at that. Now, all of these power stations are either boiling water or pressurised water reactors. They are made fail-safe by having all sorts of backups to stop them when things go pear-shaped. They are not safe fail, i.e. when something goes wrong, they don't shut themselves down automatically. A month ago, there was a talk by the Institute of Engineers from the head of Atomic Energy about the Generation 4 power stations. We all went there excited, yippee, this is going to be the answer to our pants. It turns out that these things are all in the laboratory bloody stage. They're probably 20 years before one of them actually becomes commercial, and when you look at them, these small modular reactors are so exotic. The coolant in them is liquefied sodium, molten lead. Gosh, it's just enough to curl my hair thinking about it.
Thanks very much to the speakers. It's a really fascinating topic, probably the topic. First, a comment on the previous discussion. I just want to refer to the fact that the owners of Fukushima apparently are proposing to dump the entire waste into the sea. So a lot of it's there already, but apparently that's their solution to the problem they got there. Be afraid, be very afraid. But my main point was to talk about the topic that was, or the point that was raised by one of the speakers, that it's a political problem, not a technical problem of what to do about it. And I think the question of democracy is critical here. We have got to have transparency about the current situation and allow people to make a decision. And I just wanted to, I was one of the persons that put their hand up, have your power bills gone down? Well, we've got solar water heating now, and our power bill has gone down. And I'd like you to comment on the fact that Australia has one of the highest take-ups, I understand, I don't know if that's true, of solar roof already, but it's something that needs to be increased and accelerated. The second point is we have a gigantic scam, which is referred to the neoliberal. We haven't got a market solution. We have got an oligopoly between these gigantic companies and governments, which basically are their stooges.
Yep.
So
I think we've got it.
So okay, you got the point. That
Yeah.
how do we break out of that thing? I think it's through democracy, through people taking control of their power system and their whole system of governance as well. Thanks.
Look, I'd throw in a general comment that if we can have a plebiscite over a gay marriage, why the hell can't we have a plebiscite every 6 months where these core issues are actually raised, like in Switzerland, and we're asked to actually express an opinion on them. And if Australians today, they're not stupid, we're asked to express an opinion on what we should be doing with our power system, the current Liberal policy that's in place would no longer exist. So what you have is you have a democratic system which isn't working because the parties are unrepresentative of the population. The population doesn't want to engage with the political system because they think it sucks, and so you end up getting bad policies coming out. It's all it's a very basic arrangement.
10 years ago, when I put in a solar hot water system 27 years ago, I've just put in a new one a few years ago, they were the cheapest form of renewable power on the market. The cost of solar panels has come down so far that nowadays you may be better off just putting in solar panels and using the excess electricity to heat your water.
Carol.
All right, well, thanks, guys. And as always, Ollie, I was concerned you weren't going to let out how you really felt. But
No,
you know,
never
good
do,
to-
never
good to
hold
see
back.
that. So, look, very briefly, let's step back to the period before the investment gold plating that Ollie mentioned in his speech. So yes, we've certainly seen investment gold plating in the network sector. But let's go back to the days of the Tasmanian dams and the government-owned utilities in Tasmania building entire hydro power station systems that were not required, where the reserve plant margin was almost 100%. We had almost twice as many government-owned power stations as we needed, all of which was being funded by public borrowing sitting on top of the taxpayer. So we do seem to have a recurrent problem around overinvestment and inappropriate investment. And I'd suggest it's actually got to do with the political cycle, the democratic difficulty of making long-term investment decisions when facing a short-term political cycle. So comment one there. Comment two, we've reached a stage where the network charges and the electricity price is so high that people who can afford to put solar panels and batteries
Going off the grid.
are going off grid.
Yep.
As I have, as I suspect many of the people here have. That is going to be undermining the financial stability of those network companies, and at some point they're going to say, where's our handout to get us out of trouble here? So what's the end game here? Where does it go as more and more people drop off the grid? Double munger question for you.
And just a couple of points. Firstly, it costs you a lot to go off the grid in New South Wales if you're already connected. Magic Mike, before he left office, made it you've got to pay $30,000 to be disconnected off the grid in New South Wales. That's just a little aside, okay? Yeah, I've had friends who've done it. They're in Kangaroo Valley, they put in enough solar and batteries to go off the grid, they went off the grid, the government, the local distribution authority said...
The assets at a huge profit if they're going to have any risk on them. So of course you stick that in the sales contract. Because you can't sell them for a bunch of money. Any banker would put that in.
But of course, simply putting solar panels on your roof and decreasing your demand is already cutting into these guys' profits. So, you know, you don't even have to put in batteries, just enough solar panels to run yourself.
Yeah, look, don't worry. They're not going to lose money. They're regulated. They're guaranteed return. They're not going to lose money regardless of what you do. You'll end up paying for the electricity system that's already been built. You're not going to be able to get away from it.
We've got to keep going. Hey, we've got to get...
Just a quick one to answer the government overinvestment. No human design system is perfect. We're not gods, we're just humans. The government system of government ownership had all sorts of flaws. State governments used to regularly force prices down, raid reserve coffers to make themselves look good. They found a much better way of doing it by selling public assets.
Right, thank you for your talk. I'm Kieran from the PIP Management Committee. Okay, in relation to your comments that it's not a technical problem, it's more a political obstacle to devising a rational energy policy and dealing effectively with climate change. What are your opinions on Tony Abbott's comments that policy to deal with climate change and rational
energy policy is like primitive people killing goats to appease volcano gods, sacrificing our industries and our living standards to appease the climate gods. What he calls a post-socialist instinct for big government with a post-Christian nostalgia for making sacrifices. That climate change itself is probably doing good, might even be beneficial. Extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere producing more plant life, leading to global greening and an all-round prosperity, a view supported by Liberal MP Craig Kelly. Then you had the likes of Scott Morrison handling lumps of coal in Parliament and at a Liberal Party fundraiser, underscoring his and his government's commitment for more power generated
Can I
from
stop
fossil fuels.
Excuse me, can I stop the question there? Because there's a basic flaw in your question. You expect its logic to come from Tony Abbott. Next question, please.
No,
I actually think he's pretty good there because he didn't grunt like Trump would have, and there was some form of flow in that general discussion of moronic humour. So I'd give him points for a display of moronic humour. So I think that's a pretty good effort for Tony, actually.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he's serious. Do you think that Malcolm Turnbull has failed the test of leadership, present and future generations, by catastrophically not standing up to the anti-science, reactionary climate deniers in his own party?
Just a one-word answer, please.
You want one word? Well, I'll make it about a three-word answer. When we first started BZE, Malcolm Turnbull came down and gave us a wonderful talk about what a good work we were doing and how renewable energy was the new thing. Right now, he's again it, and he's probably going to lose. He's going to lose the election because of it. If he changes, he's going to lose leadership of the Liberal Party. So.
Look, I'd say that you have to go from experience. He tried once and he got shot for it. He's a bit reluctant to try and do it again. He thinks he's the best leader for the whole free world, and so therefore he's unlikely to want to try and do it again. I mean, you learn from experience. You don't forget a time where you lose leadership by one vote, and to take that issue up again, which is what you're asking him to do, where he could lose the crown again, is probably a challenge for any human being.
Okay, Oliver, if 20% of our prices are related to electricity generation, what incentive do businesses have to invest in renewable energy, enter the energy market, where 80% of the price is actually going to be part of the regulation sector rather than actual generation? And secondly, if price of electricity gets too high and economies start to collapse or struggle, long term, can regulation itself actually be self-sustainable, or will that also collapse from its own inefficiencies?
Look, I think, quick question. I was really, when I talked this, I was quite fundamentally talking about retail prices. Once you get into the commercial sector, the energy price has a bigger impact rather than in the retail sector. So energy prices do matter a little bit to the commercial sector. And I think what you're seeing here is that you've seen recently numerous large industrial businesses like Sun Metals in Queensland actually build large-scale 200 megawatt solar farms to have next to their production facilities. You're seeing this all over the country now, where major corporates are actually buying large renewable facilities themselves and stringing the power directly from those facilities to their own production facilities to try and get away from the network charges on the way.
And do they pay the $30,000 fee?
Well, they're not actually going off grid.
I've got a very quick question. I was actually, and it's slightly off the topic, but it's a bit of a thumbnail sketch. You'd mentioned obviously most of the problems are political, and I'd take you to Queensland, where in the 4 seats that Labor is so concerned about around Adani. If you could give us a thumbnail sketch of what's actually happening there in terms of renewable energy and in terms of jobs and the just transition, and how you crack with the siloed world, most of the people who live in those areas are reading The Australian and listening, thinking that a lot of the Liberals have some legitimacy. So, where do you see the way in? What's happening on the ground and where do you see the way in? And if you've got time, what are the issues in New South Wales in terms of, where do you see the good things happening in renewables there?
Yeah, there's more jobs being created in northern Queensland with the solar projects that are being built in Queensland. There's a massive wave of solar and wind projects going in that region in North Queensland. They're all under construction now. The people there do actually see the jobs. I think the problem for the
are any of them in those 4 seats that Labor's so concerned about?
Well, I'm not exactly sure which seats they're in, but some of them are in Bob Catter's seat, which is Kennedy, and some are up in further up there, you have a lot of them going in. But to be honest, there is a real problem here that we built mining towns, to be honest, and we put people in those mining towns. The mines have closed down, and to be honest, what's there for them? Those houses should have been leased to people. People have equity locked up in houses, so I have real sympathy for people because their whole life is now locked into a house, which actually was a piece of industrial infrastructure. They shouldn't have actually bought the house, and the mine used those people and used them to make them come there to work for them, and then they're not cleaning up after them. Those towns actually, unfortunately, if they don't have an economic existence, that's a cost of mining in the first place. The mine should be responsible for buying people out of those houses if they're going to shut the town down. But again, they've dumped the cost, they take the profits and they dump the social cost with us, society. So, there's a real question.
I just want to make a very important point on that. You often hear politicians saying that we've got to cut the subsidies for renewables because fossil fuel doesn't have a subsidy. Oliver has just given you a brilliant example of the huge subsidy that we all pay to fossil fuel.
Look, given that we've got this oligopoly in the energy market, what is the solution to driving down prices? Because a lot of people put that ahead of climate change considerations. Do we wait till it collapses under its own weight because people are putting solar panels on their roofs, or do we need to do something else?
Look, prices are coming down significantly, and they will come down if you look at any price forecast now from about 2020 onwards, and that's really as a result of all the construction that's underway in the renewable industry, the electricity price part of your bill is actually going to fall quite significantly. What we've had is a lag. We had an investment freeze with Tony Abbott. That caused this investment freeze, which actually caused a supply and demand imbalance. We're going to swing the other way, because if you don't shut down the coal-fired power stations, which is what the Liberal government is threatening to do, and people have already built the renewables and they're in construction, we're going to have an oversupply of power, so we're going to have lower prices than we would have for a period of time because we've now completely swung the other way. This is a disaster for the private enterprise system because we're going like this rather than allowing people to go in an orderly fashion and replace these assets. So yes, good part about it, you will see lower prices if they get away with the neg and actually have a pathetic emissions target in the neg. You'll see lower prices, but then all you're going to do is you're going to stop investment again, and then you're going to get whacked in the back of the head 3 years later or 4 years later because you'll have an investment freeze in the renewable energy industry. What a disaster for everybody. And each time this cycle goes through, the cost of capital goes up because the risk premium goes up for anybody building.
Is it possible that in future electricity will displace gas so we can stop fracking?
Yes, you can make gas today from solar panels. As I said, you can actually put hydrogen back into the gas system. You can make gas easily. You combine hydrogen with carbon. Yes, you can do it. It's easy.
Thanks very much. I think we better stop there. I'm very sorry. We have gone a tad over time, which is very naughty, but it's because we have this band coming on. I just want to put in a plug. Thank the speakers for a fantastic night, and thanks for a very interesting talk. It's been absolutely terrific, and thank you for coming. Must say, next week, Jeremy Corbyn, media harassment and British...
No, the one before that.
Oops, sorry. Australia's economic policy in whose interest? Wow, can't read. Australia's economic policy in whose interest? Ben Spies-Butcher from Macquarie University and Frank Stillwell, always a fascinating speaker from Sydney University. So don't miss next week. Australia's economic policy in whose interest? Next week. Thanks very much.